We're looking at the quadrant 1 of the unit circle. Last time we talked about the angles, so we can just really quick fill in the angles here because we've already done that from the previous time. We start off at 0 degrees. Also, if we're talking about radians, that's going to be 0 radians as well. Right, so we said the next jump up here would be 30 degrees. We also said that that's equivalent to pi over 6 radians. The next one was 45 degrees, which is equivalent to pi over 4 radians. The next triangle we have here is going to be 60 degrees. That's the central angle. 60. And that's going to be pi over 3 radians. And then the last one we were talking about in quadrant 1 is going to be 90 degrees. And we said that's the same thing as pi over 2 radians. So we want to get you really familiar with these, at least for now, the first quadrant, these angles both in degrees and radians, as well as we're going to talk today about the heights and the bases of these triangles. So we know that all these radiuses slash hypotenuses are all 1 unit long, and we know that because we're specifically talking about the unit circle, and by definition the hypotenuse slash radius is always going to be 1 for the circle. Alright, so let's look at this first one, this green triangle that I'm making here. So what we're trying to do is trying to find the height and the base of this triangle. So if we recall back 2 lessons ago, if we have a laying down 30, 60, 90 like this, then the height of this, let's do this in red, I guess we haven't used red for any of this. The height of this is going to be a half, that's the shortest side. The base of this triangle is going to be square root of 3 over 2. Alright, so knowing this, what they like to do is, because this is technically the y, the height of the triangle, and this is technically the x value, right? It's the x value of the x-axis, the base of the triangle. They like to write this as square root of 3 over 2 is our x, and our y is a half. So just to clarify again, x and y. The y is the height of the triangle. It's the value that corresponds with the y-axis. That's how high the side is in relationship to the y-axis. The x is radical 3 over 2, and that's because that's the length in terms of x-axis. All right, let's do the same thing. This time we're looking at 45 degrees. Right, so this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. And what we said from 2 classes ago is that, well, if we have a 45, 45, 90 triangle and our hypotenuse is 1, then we know the height is going to be square root of 2 over 2. And the base is going to be the same exact thing. It's an isosceles triangle. So for this one, our x and our y for our point is radical 2 over 2. And then when we're looking at the 60, it's another 30, 60, 90, but it's standing up, right? So I know that the bottom here, our x is going to be 1/2. That's the shortest side. And then this side here is going to be the square root of 3 over 2. That's the middle side. Okay, and then I saved these ones for last because they're a little bit weird to think about, but once you understand how it works, it's really not that bad. But what happens if we don't move? What if we stay at 0? All right, so let's do an x and a y for a 0. So our x, because it's a unit circle, it's 1 unit long because it's on the radius. It is a radius. It's touching the outside of the circle. Our x is 1 unit long. And it doesn't go up, so we don't have a height. So our height, our y, is 0. Okay, so when our angle is 0, our x is 1, and our y is 0. Now let's use the same thinking to do our 90 degrees, or pi over 2 radians. This time, it's not going left or right, so we don't have an x. This would be 0 for our x. But our y is going to go from the origin all the way to the circumference of our circle, so that's the same thing as a radius. That's a 1. Alright, so what we did here was we figured out, well, we wrote back in the angles in degrees and radians, and for each of those angles we went and found the circle, we found the triangle, and we figured out the height, which is the y, and the base length, which is the x, and we took those from the special right triangles, the unit circle right triangles with our hypotenuse of 1 for each of them. Alright, so this is a lot of information for unit circle. I'm trying to break it down as best as I can and explain to you how all these things are put together. I know it can be overwhelming. I want you guys to sit through it and kind of like think your way through it. If you can, go ahead and redraw it and reconstruct this quadrant, because if we can master quadrant 1, then we can master the rest of the quadrants pretty easy, because we're going to see these numbers pop up over and over again. And if we know the orientation of the right triangles, then in the end our job should be a lot easier. So good job today. Again, make sure you write down your notes. If you have any questions, please bring them in for next class, and I will see you next time.